At the beginning of the movie, a woman is shown heading to school to teach. The woman's name is Ling. Ling is a teacher at a high school in Singapore. Arriving at the parking lot, Ling took out a drug and injected it in the stomach. The drug is a fertility hormone, and she has been doing it for years because she has not been blessed with a child. Although Mandarin lessons discourage the children from learning, Ling is still serious about teaching them. After finishing teaching, Ling went home. There she lived with her husband and father-in-law who was having a stroke. Because Ling had to go to work every day, she hired a nanny to take care of her father-in-law. Even so, Ling also still took care of her father-in-law with affection before and after work. After that, Ling prepared dinner. In the evening, Ling and her father-in-law were seen waiting for the arrival of her husband, who lately often came home late at night, or even did not come home at all. The next day, Ling went to the hospital alone to check her fertility. Then, the doctor there told her that Ling was now in her fertile period and asked her to try again with her husband. On her way back, by chance, she met one of her students named Wei Lun who was getting medical treatment. Since Wei Lun was alone at that time, Ling gave him a ride home in her car. During the ride, Ling learned that Wei Lun lived alone because his parents often traveled abroad for business. When getting out of the car, Wei Lun said something unpleasant. Ling, upon hearing that, remained silent without saying anything. It turns out that what he meant by those words was that the students in his class always caused trouble and weren't serious about studying. Every day, Ling injected fertility hormones, and the pain she suffered had become something she was used to for years. The next day, while Ling was conducting an exam, she suddenly received a call from her younger brother who had been waiting for her outside the school. However, shortly after Ling left the classroom, all of her students began to wander around, except for Wei Lun, who lived alone. It turns out that Ling's younger brother was a durian seller. However, because his durians often didn't sell well, he would come to borrow money from his sister, and Ling would always give him money in exchange for a bag of durians. When Ling returned to the classroom, she wasn't surprised to see that some of her students were no longer there. She continued with her lesson. A few moments later, Ling noticed that Wei Lun kept looking at the durians she had brought. Knowing that Wei Lun was hungry, she invited him to eat durian together, and that's when their relationship started to grow closer. That evening, following the doctor's advice, Ling was seen waiting for her husband, Andrew, for having hormone activities. However, when Andrew returned home, he refused the invitation and said that they had been trying for 8 years without success. The next day, Ling asked Andrew to take care of his father because their nanny didn't show up, and she had to go to work. While at the school office, Wei Lun asked Ling for permission to postpone his exam because he had martial arts training, and Ling immediately granted him permission. Out of curiosity, Ling went to the training location and saw Wei Lun very enthusiastic during the training. At that moment, Ling was reminded of her own youthful days full of enthusiasm. In the next exam session, only Wei Lun attended the class. A few moments later, Ling received a call from her in-law's caregiver reminding her that her work hours had ended. Since Wei Lun hadn't finished his exam, Ling had to take her student home. There, Wei Lun was surprised to see the condition of Ling's in-law, who, despite being paralyzed, could still think intelligently. This was evident when the elderly man helped Wei Lun with his homework. After that, they had a meal together just like a family, and the atmosphere felt warm with Wei Lun's presence. The next day, while Ling was injecting hormones, she accidentally fell asleep in the car. A few moments later, the headmaster arrived and woke her up. Seeing Ling's weak and pale condition, the headmaster allowed her to go home. A few days later, Ling returned to the hospital without her husband accompanying her. Since Andrew refused to try the previous day, she decided to attempt in vitro fertilization with her husband's sperm. However, the doctor there suggested that Ling use the latest sperm sample from Andrew. Since it was difficult to reach her husband, Ling had to undergo in vitro fertilization alone. A few days later, while Ling was on her way home with Wei Lun, she suddenly received a phone call from the doctor informing her that the in vitro fertilization had failed. Upon hearing the news, Ling could only remain silent. She stopped the car and turned up the music loudly. There, Ling felt deeply saddened by her unfortunate situation. The following day, it was time for Wei Lun to participate in a competition, and Ling attended it along with her in-laws. During the competition, Wei Lun gave an impressive performance and became the champion. After the competition, Ling invited Wei Lun to celebrate his success by going to eat durians with her in-laws at home. While checking her students' homework, Ling suddenly smiled when she saw Wei Lun's name, to the point where she didn't realize that her ink had soaked the paper. Since getting close to Wei Lun, Ling had regained her enthusiasm for life. The next day, while Ling was on the road, she accidentally saw her husband with another woman. It turns out her husband's affair had long been suspected by Ling, who also felt guilty for not being able to give him children. After that, Ling returned home to take care of her father-in-law. There, Ling couldn't contain all her sadness, and she just wished for a man who truly loved her. Seeing her daughter-in-law so sad, her father-in-law could only signal her to smile. Then, when Ling woke up from her sleep, she suddenly heard the sound of a baby crying and immediately picked up the baby. It turned out it was all just a dream. As the rain began to fall, Ling wondered why her father-in-law wasn't responding to her calls. That's when Ling realized that her father-in-law had passed away. This event deeply shook Ling's emotions. A few days later, Ling resumed her teaching as usual. After finishing her classes, Ling, as usual, took Wei Lun back to his apartment. Upon arriving at the apartment building, Wei Lun suddenly had a nosebleed. Ling, who was worried about Wei Lun's condition, took the initiative to take him into the apartment. And it was there that the indecent act that should not be done by a teacher and their student occurred. Since that incident, Wei Lun has been very ambitious to get the love of his teacher, to the point that he waits for Ling every day in her office and makes other teachers start to be suspicious of the relationship between the two of them. Because she feels uncomfortable with Wei Lun always following her, Ling reprimanded him loudly while saying that everything that happened yesterday was just a misunderstanding.